Mr. Adesina has been talking about some of the highs and lows since he took office in 2015, but also just reflecting on the journey of the bank. You know that it's part and parcel of the financial architecture within the African continent, Juliet, but also talking about some of the successes. We know that, for example, they do talk about the 5 priorities around making sure that Africa, there is energy, there is electricity in so many countries, issues around integration of the African continent, but also issues pertaining to food security, among other priorities, but also calling this a transitional phase, saying that it's a point of renewal for the African Development Bank as they look forward to electing the new leadership, Chile, to do understand that from the 29th of May, that's when they will have an opportunity to elect new leadership. But most importantly, Gillette, also Mr. Adesina, talking about the African Development Bank, especially in these very turbulent times where the geopolitical instability is a very big issue, but also have seen also aid being cut, affecting quite a number of countries in the African continent, but also Gillette's reflecting on that conflict between Russia and Ukraine, talking about how the continent has been so resilient in really just cushioning the member states from the effects of that particular conflict, the disruption of the global supply chains as that conflict is still intensifying between Russia and Ukraine.
What about global dynamics? How's the continent repositioning itself?
Well, by all means, Juliet, so that's one of the key issues really for the policymakers, for the government officials, to look at how Africa can respond to these new challenges. You know, a very quite unstable global environment, especially in light of those tariffs that were announced by Trump administration, albeit with a pause now, but creating massive uncertainty. So it's going to be a very, very important time for the continent really to craft its response in terms of dealing with these new challenges. In fact, they say for the new leadership, this is going to be the foremost task for the African continent, to come up with a blueprint that is going to be so responsive. As you know, that a number of African nations are still facing a myriad of challenges. But of course, we know that for the African Development Bank, it's about really pushing this agenda of development. And we know that there are some issues, I mean, from the issues of instability, Juliet, this particular point where we are in West Africa, we know that for some time they've had some challenges of unconstitutional changes of government really affecting the journey of development, but also looking at other options like internal issues, like really just accelerating the pace of the implementation of the continental free trade area. For example, we do know that here in Abidjan, it's a very important city for a number of countries, landlocked countries that are relying on this port city here in Cote d'Ivoire.
And then also we can expect the election of the new leadership later this week?
Well, very much so, Juliet. We know that South Africa has thrown its weight behind Ms. Bajabulile Swazi Shabalala as its candidate, and she has been preaching the message of transformation, making sure that the African Development Bank is responsive to the needs of the continent, but also in terms of the voice of the continent. We know that these are very interesting times where the global south, where South Africa is currently chairing the G20. So, you know, we've seen so many occasions where she has been lobbying so many countries, the member states, for them to vote for her come the 29th of May. That's when they will have election. But there are other candidates as well. From Zambia, the vice president of the World Bank as well, Mr. Samuel Mambo as well, has been campaigning extensively, also selling the message of change in terms of how this particular bank should be structured. But you do also have other candidates as well from Senegal and many other countries as well. So it's bound to be a very interesting time here in Abidjan as the African Development Bank is awaiting for the new leadership.